Today we have with us Jim, and Jim is from Australia. Jim, you'll apologize if I don't pronounce your last name. I don't know how to do that very well.
Thank you, John. Yeah, it's Lost Brown. I just use the first part of my name for my socials, but yeah, my surname is Lost Brown. I was born James Lost Brown, but yeah, I go by Jim.
Well, welcome. It's great to have Jim here today. He's going to be showing his artwork of doing fish, and we were just talking. It's so neat that it supports catch and release, which is so wonderful in today's environment. So we talked some time back about the phalos and watching artists use the phalos, which are so strong. And the other one is always the luminescence. And Jim uses a lot of the luminescence, and it's going to be wonderful to watch him do that. So please ask questions if you have those. If you're on Zoom, you'll be able to interact with Jim directly. If you're on Facebook, we'll be giving those messages to Jim. So with that, again, Jim, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Hi, John. G'day. Look, it's a real pleasure to meet you, and a real honor. I love Daniel Smith artist materials. They're what makes my art really pop. So yeah, we'll talk about how I use them. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So
hello, everybody.
Good evening.
Hi, Rajat.
Hi.
Can we watch Jim's slideshow?
Yes, sure. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're gonna love these. These are fantastic.
Do we see this screen now? Okay.
Yes.
So you begin with Jim's Instagram. That's where he usually connects best with his followers. And then Jim, the next couple of slides will be your artworks. And yes, we begin with this piece. Would you like to share more? Okay, go ahead.
The kingfish. Yeah, the kingfish, that's a piece that it's not quite complete in that image. I'm working on a series of 6 large fish for Tacklewood Port Lincoln, who are opening a huge store, 1,000 square meter store in Port Lincoln in November. And this kingfish is one of the featured South Australian species I've been working on. Yes, here we have an oyster. So most of my work is fish species for fishing tackle companies, but I also get commissions coming through from food companies, and this was for a New South Wales-based oyster fisherman for his father. I really enjoyed using that, and my signature paint that I used, the Arctic Fire, that came in. It was perfect to use for the inside of the shell. Yeah, I loved working on that. So yeah, I should be seeing some more oysters coming in. The Golden Trevally, that's another piece for Tacklewood. So recently I was commissioned by Tacklewood Australia to create 6 designs that's going to be going on their premium Buku range apparel range. And this is a tropical species, found quite extensively across the globe, but it features a lot in Northern Australia. And yeah, look, I had a huge fun, as you can see, using quinacridone gold in there, which is, again, one of my absolute favorite colors. Quinacridone gold is a paint that features in just about every one of my pieces that I use around the eye. So I love that color. Yellowfin tuna, this is, again, another from the apparel range. Yeah, I absolutely love the blue there, which is my phthalo blue in the green shade. It's so deep. Yeah, had a lot of fun there, and as you can see, there's a lot of silver in the flank of the fish, so I get to experiment with turquoise and the lilac colors, and again, Arctic Fire that's in there across the flank of the fish. So yeah, it's a beautiful fish. And it grows to huge proportions too. This one is one of my favorites that I have done. It's a southern bluefin tuna. And as you can see, I really got to experiment with all of the watercolors in my collection with this one. especially as, you know, when they're a little bit more juvenile, they can have the bands in their flank that show up there. So I've actually got that fish with me as an art print. So hopefully we'll have time to hand embellish it. And interestingly, I only picked it up from the printers yesterday. It's not been released yet. It will soon. Once the clothing range gets released by Tackle World, this is going to become a print available. I haven't hand embellished it yet. So we could have a little bit of fun with that, experimenting with some of the paints, the iridescence, to see how I would actually touch it up. Because to me, that fish looks just about finished. But let's see what we can do. Well, it is complete. What we can do by adding a little bit of iridescence to it. Another one from the Tackle World Buku range that's going to be released on their premium shirts. This is a striped marlin. You might notice, actually, looking at that fish, that I use a combination of watercolor and pencils. I use Caran d'Ache Pablos as a base. And yeah, we'll talk about how I use, I kind of create my artwork in a reverse fashion. Rather than using watercolor as a base and then illustrating on top, I do it the other way around. So yeah, that's a beautiful fish species. One of the fastest in the world. The king prawn, the black tiger prawn, I'm sorry. Yeah, this came in as a commission with that previous oyster. So yeah, most of my work is fish-based, but I do get these wonderful commissions that come in of crustaceans as well. So yeah, I love that piece. I really enjoyed that, and I got to use some lovely greens in the tail there, and quinacridone featured in that piece too.
That's the last on the slide.
Are you there, John?
There we go. You were telling us earlier that you had gone to Australia in 2006, 2005.
Yes, I did. Look, it was a childhood ambition to move here. I remember as a boy being fascinated by the map on the wall that looked like a little Scotty dog, and then I started learning about, you know, the outback and the nature here, and I'm passionate about wildlife, so I always wanted to move to Australia. And in 2001, I did a drive, 50,000-kilometer drive all the way around the coast of Australia, up and down through the middle and around Tasmania, and just fell in love with the country, and yeah, was able to actually immigrate here from the UK originally. I grew up in the southwest of the UK in Gloucestershire. And yeah, all part of my journey. I went to university in North Wales, in Bangor, and just taking a step back there a little bit, I remember when I was at school, my art teachers saying to me, you have to go and study art at university, you really must, but I also have a scientific mind, and I wanted to do everything. And I actually studied oceanography, geological oceanography at university. And had a scientific career for about 15 years. So after I left university, I started working in the oil and gas industry, which enabled me to travel the world to over 50 countries, which was amazing. I did that for 15 years. I did a lot of fishing in that time off the back of ships as well, I can tell you. So a lot of my inspiration just comes from experience, yeah, of catching fish. I'm very passionate about all ocean life. But after working for about 15 years, I started developing a spinal disease called ankylosing spondylitis. And I felt that I wouldn't be able to manage the 84-hour work weeks offshore in oil and gas. And I gave it up and became a stay-at-home dad, which I did for about 9 years. And during that time, I started coming back to my art as I had taken quite a break from it. I was always naturally talented since a small boy. It was just something I did. And yeah, I was recognized by one of the kids' mums at school, saw my work on the wall when my daughters had a play date, and said, you've got to do something with that. And within a couple of weeks, I had an offer to illustrate a book. And that's what really gave me a kickstart into coming back and now having an art career, which I started out as an official business just in October 2021. And yeah, it's really, I love it. It's going great.
Awesome. I know you had your book with you. Can you just quickly maybe hold up the book?
Yeah, sure, John. So it's a natural resources management book called Our Country. And I had a wonderful time with it because I was able to illustrate not just fish, but other subject. Got a bit of light reflection. There's a bubok owl, which I did for my youngest daughter who loves owls. And here's another, a white-cheeked rosella. So these are straight illustrations. There wasn't any paint involved. That was really before I discovered my relationship with Daniel Smith Artists Materials watercolors. But that's what got me going. And then one of the editors there said, you've really got to have an Instagram. And then I created the Instagram. And I must have done some fish because I suddenly found myself doing more and more fish. And it just grew. But interestingly enough, about 20 years ago, I had it in the back of my mind. One day, I'd like to become a fish artist and really feature on the fish. So I've really gone full circle in my life by working in science, working as a stay-at-home dad, and now working as a professional artist. So I feel I'm achieving everything I could ever dream of.
Super awesome. So Jim is going to give us a demonstration. He asked that you can certainly ask him questions, and we'll kind of see how that goes. He definitely wants questions. It just so you'll see how that goes and let everybody know. So if you're on Zoom, you can ask directly. Again, if you're on Facebook, we will just redirect the questions to Jim. All right, Jim.
Fantastic, John. Yes.
So if you want to start, you can go ahead and start, and
yeah.
We'll just ask you questions.
Okay, John. Well, I thought today we'd do a little demonstration of how I hand embellish my art prints. Because I have prints that go out each week, and I'll talk a bit about it first. When it comes to art, I'm an experimenter, and that's how I've created my process of illustrating and then watercolor painting on top. So I'll speak a little bit about that. I started using Prismacolor pencils, which are wax based. And then by chance, I discovered that the Daniel Smith watercolors are so incredible, the pigments, that they would actually adhere to the wax. And by chance, I started doing it in the reverse process, rather than creating the watercolor and then illustrating on top. Recently, I've moved to what I feel is the perfect combination, which is Caran d'Ache Pablo, and then largely using the luminescence watercolors on top of that afterwards. So my art prints are produced on a linen paper, and it's really important that they are UV based. The printer is a UV based print. If it's a water based printing, it's not possible to do it, because when you apply the watercolor and hand embellishing, the pigments run. So it's really important, excuse me, that it's UV based. So one of my pieces that it heads out every week, several times, is the Jumping Barramundi. So that's a print on linen paper, and I thought first up I would go through the quick 5-minute process of hand embellishing it with the watercolors. So John, if you'd like to just come off me for a second, I'll spin my camera around and we'll get cracking with that. How does that sound?
That's great.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
Hello, Jim.
Hi.
When you're talking about inks, are you talking about eco-solvent inks?
No. I'm actually not too sure about the answer to that question. All that I know from my printer is that it's a UV printer.
Right. All right. It's what prints onto the paper in a UV way. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's due to the stabilization of the pigments. Now, here we are. I'm just setting up my camera.
I'm just thinking about your usage of water on the substrate, and if it weren't a permanent ink, it would obviously bleed, would it not?
That's absolutely correct. So here we are. We're set up now.
Our practice worked, Jim. The orientation of the camera, stayed on landscape.
It did, Ethel. How does that look? Does that look okay?
Yeah.
That looks good.
All right. So this is a barramundi, which is one of our wonderful tropical Northern Australian species that we have here in Australia, and it's found elsewhere in the world, all the way through to the Nile perch in Africa, which grows to humongous, gigantic proportions. That's an incredible fish. So this is what I received back from the printer. which is it's basically a copy of my illustration, and it's on this lovely linen paper. So what I'm going to do first is just get a little bit of black with a Copic multi-liner in on the eye. I'm just going to run through the process that I would do to hand embellish one of these prints. I'll get my water a bit closer. Now, first up, I'm going to apply some tonal changes. So what I'm using is iridescent blue silver. Hopefully this goes okay, because my hands are actually shaking, believe it or not. So I come around the back. Now, can you see the change? We're getting a little bit of tone coming in there. Is that visible?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'll usually put a bit around the back, a little bit under the fin, and then a little bit on the gill.
Paper primed?
Sorry?
Is the linen paper primed?
No, it's not.
So it's as it is. It's just a bit
Yeah,
unusual
that's right.
linen as a paper.
It refers, it's a paper rather than a cotton rag. The linen just refers to the texture. It's got a texture that's like a weave, that looks like a weave.
Yeah.
And I find it takes it takes the watercolor quite nicely.
Mm.
So, you know, every one of these that I produce is unique, you know, obviously because each one is just hand embellished, the paint falls differently each time. So there we go. We can start seeing that we're now getting a little bit of tonal change in the fish. You know, quite often when I'm painting, I'll also dab a bit of the watercolor off if I've applied a bit too much.
Jim, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, when you approach a fish that's just, you know, with no movement, this one looks like it's, you know, hopping out of the water. You know, do you handle those different?
I use the same process in terms of the tone. I put shadows behind the fins. We should get onto the tuna next, hopefully, which could be interesting because I've never hand embellished it. I only just picked it up from the printers yesterday. So that could be a little bit of an experiment to see how we go and what we're going to apply. But yeah, going on to this fish, this was produced from Mo Tackle, which is one of Australia's largest fishing tackle companies. And it took me quite a long time to get the pose. This is a really popular print of mine. And what I do is I use, when I'm back talking with John, we'll maybe discuss that. I use baking paper as a large tracing paper so that I can keep altering the illustration until I'm happy with it. And then I transfer it onto my final paper when I'm doing the original. This was a really difficult piece to do because it's really quite hard to get that dynamic pose of a barramundi actually jumping. So yeah, I'm really pleased with this piece. I might just add a bit
Thanks for
extra in there.
sharing. I heard a good
You're
joke
welcome.
the other day. It was, what kind of music do you use to catch a fish?
Great. Oh, well, not so much for me for catching the fish. I'm always listening to, you know, the weather, the sound of the birds, you know, yeah, the trees rustling, that kind of thing. But I do like to use music in my studio. And, you know, one of my absolute favorite bands is an Australian one called Peking Duck. I love their music. And if you watch my Instagram reels and stories, they feature, you know, quite a lot on them. But you know, I love the Foo Fighters. Birds of Tokyo, that sort of thing. So I'm just going to start applying a bit of quinacridone gold here. I always have a bit of quinacridone gold in the eyes of my fish. I'm actually also going to just use a little bit of a Pablo. So I'm just using a bit of a pencil there. I'm just going to put a bit of extra color in the mouth.
Hi, Jim. This is Rajat
Hi
here.
there.
Yeah.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Really enjoying this.
Well, that's great. I just wanted to check one thing. You have done with a drawing is done with a color pencil, isn't it? As you do
That's
both wash and color. pencil.
That's correct. Yes. So I use my favorite. Actually, made a bit of a mistake there. I always love to use a little bit of paper. Yeah, my favorite that I use is Caran d'Ache. I love the Pablos.
Uh-huh.
And then, yeah, the watercolors that I use are mostly the iridescence, the luminescence. So I'm
Right.
just applying a bit of quinacridone gold on here.
Great. And mostly you keep background limbo white, isn't it? You love
I'm
that.
sorry?
You try to keep the background limbo white, isn't it?
I do. Yes, I do. Now, I'm
That's
just going to reach across. I'm actually finding that the watercolor is not really adhering too well this time on this particular print. I might just use a little bit of pencil. Now I'm going to get a bit more. Now, with the barramundi, the freshwater ones, they have more of a green color to them. Actually, you can see every print is slightly different. It's not actually taking the watercolor today. For some reason, I thought this would be a fail-safe demonstration, but it's actually repelling it. So that doesn't usually happen. But yeah, where there is white, it is soaking in a bit better.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I do love using a white background.
Right.
Do you think that that would be a good use for the watercolor ground to go on to
It could well be.
A deer. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to go to my signature paint now, which is Arctic Fire, Geochrome Arctic Fire. And as I was saying to John before, it really is on fire for me. It's the signature paint that I use in every single one of my pieces because it's wonderful. On the paper, it changes as the angle of the light changes as you walk past it or you move the paper. It releases turquoise in one direction and a lilac magenta type color in the other direction. So, you know, I find it absolutely a wonderful paint to use. I wish I had got myself an extra tub of fresh water. I didn't think of that. That's okay, I've cleaned it enough. So I'm just going to get some Arctic Fire on my brush and hopefully you'll be able to see it come to life. Now, how's that looking through the camera? Are you seeing the iridescence there? So I'm going to get a bit on the flank as well.
I have a
Hello.
question about why you use the baking parchment rather than tracing paper.
Well, that's interesting. Two reasons. One, a lot of my pieces that I do are very large commission pieces. I get commissioned by fishermen to do fish that are up to 1.5 meters long. So yeah, I can't get hold of the tracing paper in that size. And another reason is it's very, very cheap and does just as good a job. I love it. I buy the absolute cheapest roll of baking paper the supermarket has. And when I'm doing large pieces, I roll it out onto my desk and then I roll out another piece and I put a masking paper strip across the middle. And yeah, I use it because I can keep editing the illustration until I'm happy with it, that it's just about perfect to my eye. And then I draw on the other side of the baking paper and transfer it onto my final paper that I'm using.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful thing to use. So what I'm going to do now, yeah, this hasn't happened to me before, but there we go. That's live art. The quinacridone gold didn't want to take to this particular print, which I haven't found has happened yet. You know what it is? I realize now my printers have actually just changed to a $50,000 new printer. So I might have to get them to return to the previous printer they were using because it's acted slightly different, but it's taken some of the color. But what I'm going to do, if you'll bear with me, I'm going to move my camera and see if we can catch. Can you see the iridescence that comes out of that paint from different angles?
Jim, hi,
Hi there.
it's me, Vesnik. I want to suggest you something if you want to print on top of your, if you want to paint on top of your prints,
Yes, please go ahead.
why don't you use watercolor medium, the transparent one, so the colors will be like amazing. Did you see the sessions of Daniel Smith that we had in watercolor ground? I suggest you to use it on top of your print, and then on top of that, you could, if you paint, your colors will come just like in paper.
Thank you. I will look at that. I think, you know, for me, my favorite one that I use is the Arctic Fire. It just brings the fish alive, but I will certainly look into that. Thank you. So there we go. There's the, we'll just let that dry. But, you know, if you can see in the light how those iridescents work. So I'll put that aside and let it dry. So yeah, John, would you like to go back to chatting, or shall I move on to another demonstration?
Oh, and another demonstration would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. Look, I've got 3 pieces here. I'll just remove that
I have a
one.
question.
Hi there.
Hi, I have a question. This is Larry. And I'm wondering, why do you like the Caran d'Ache Pablos? Are they at all water soluble, or do they stick to the paper well after it's been printed on, or what is your goal there?
Well, the Caran d'Ache I used ever since I was a boy, actually. But I was using Prismacolor, and they were really good for large pieces. But I did find that the cores of them were just broken through most of the pencils I was using. So I needed to find another pencil to move away from the Prismacolor. It just wasn't up to the standard that I wanted. So I moved to Caran d'Ache because I know that they're just one of the best pencils in the world. And I do like the Pablo because it's quite hard. And it holds a really fine tip. So yeah, it's a really great pencil, but the whole Caran d'Ache range is superb.
Okay, so it's the hardness of the pencil and the fact that it's better made and protected inside its wood column.
Absolutely, they're very high quality. Whereas I find some of the other pencil brands that they can have broken cores. The wood can split too. With the Caran d'Ache, I've never had a broken core. I've never had any issues with them. I only actually moved back onto them recently. So yeah, I'm really pleased with them. I feel I've got the perfect materials for what I do in using the Caran d'Ache and using Daniel Smith watercolors.
Okay, are the Pablos wax based, or what are they based in? Clay, wax?
I'm not too sure, actually. I'm afraid on that one. I should have looked that up.
Okay. Yeah. Life's too short.
Yeah. So look, with this tuna, I'll just say I only picked this up from my printers yesterday. It's not in production released yet. I'm waiting on Tackle World to release their apparel before I release this as a print available. I have not hand embellished it yet. So I thought we'd just have a little bit of fun and see what happens, because, you know, to me, I think the print is beautiful as it is without adding watercolor, but I know that the Arctic Fire will certainly help. So this is a lovely color that I recently discovered by Daniel Smith, which is iridescent topaz. I mean, how is that? That's amazing, isn't it? That, you know, Daniel Smith uses minerals and even gemstones like topaz. When I found that one on the shelf, it just blew me away. I thought, wow, topaz, this is a gem. You know, and another wonderful one that springs to mind is serpentine that they use. So yeah, I'm just going to experiment with this one. I've never hand embellished this fish. I don't think it needs a lot of anything. I think a covering of the Arctic Fire, but yeah, I think I'll put a bit of the topaz in. It may not pick up particularly well on the camera what I'm doing for this particular one. I think it's just going to be a very subtle change, but yeah, I hand embellish all of my pieces just so that every one is just slightly unique. I think all that this needs is a little bit of the topaz and a bit of Arctic Fire. What's interesting is I don't when I do the scale fish, often the watercolor settles in between the scales, which is quite nice too. So my actual process with the originals, I create the base, the illustration, using using the Pablo pencils, and then I turn to my watercolor over the top afterwards. Now, I was just telling John, I'm after an iridescent lilac next. That's what I'll be asking Daniel Smith for, because as you can see, purples often, you know, they feature in fish. And, you know, I tell people my favorite color in a fish to do is silver, because with silver, you get to use any color you want. It's absolutely amazing. So I think we'll just put a splash of Arctic fire over the top of this. It's just wonderful. You can just apply it on everything, and it's very subtle at first until the angle changes that you're looking at it, and then the Arctic fire catches the light, and it gives you that turquoise in one direction and lilac, magenta in the other direction. A very, very light sort of magenta color. You know, I'm just going to whack a heap of Arctic fire all over this, I think. And what it will do is it will just adhere to where the white is in the picture. Get a bit of paper. Dab that. I'm never shy to use paper to dab. Obviously, you know, I'm not creating originals here. This is just the art prints. But let's just have a look and see with the light change whether that's caught it at all. It's not so obvious on the camera, but there you go. Now you can see, sorry about that flickering, you can see how it gives off a little bit of a lilac color. And in person, in the other direction, it gives off a beautiful turquoise, but you know, we're not actually seeing that with the camera. But look, all I can recommend is go out and get some Arctic fire.
We don't really need
Because-
a second invitation. It's really, ooh.
What's that, sorry?
It's really, ooh, we don't need a second invitation. It's terrific. Look at that. Wow.
It's a beautiful paint. Yeah, I'm only sorry that we're not actually in this light. I mean, it's 3:30 in the morning here, or thereabouts. So I'm working under LED light, and we're not actually seeing the turquoise. But believe me, in natural light, you get a real turquoise. I'm not going to use any phthalo blue on that print because it won't adhere to that dark, and it's got enough. But yeah, that's my tuna, bluefin tuna, which is, yeah, one of my favorites. John, I've got another piece here, which isn't fish. Would you like me to have a little bit of an embellishment of that one?
That'd be fantastic.
Great. Now it's a bit bigger piece, a bit larger. So I might have to play with the camera a little bit. If you can just bear with me. Now, this,
Jim,
there.
Tokyo here. I just have a quick question for you. Love bees. Fish eyes. Do you have, if you were to choose 3 colors, and not every fish eye is the same, but I found if you can nail the eye, you can pretty much go in any direction you want with the rest of the fish.
Do you know, actually, it's amazing you've asked about fish eyes, because when I create an original, once I've drafted out the outline, the very first thing I do is the eye, because I would hate to paint an entire fish and then make a mistake on the eye. I think it's one of the most important pieces of the fish. So I do it first, just in case, and it's not happened yet, but just in case I mess it up and don't get it right, at least I can start again. So I always tackle the eye first, and the colors I use are black, and then I use when it comes to watercolors, I use duochrome blue pearl.
I actually have that paint. So, okay, I'm kind of, okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Go on.
It's beautiful. So when I draw the eye first, I draw the circle of the eye and then fill in the pupil. And then for the, I've got a bit of paper, I might come back to that and possibly demonstrate it. But I'll draw a couple of circles for where the light is reflecting off the eye. And I'll draw them with a blue, such as this one. What have we got here? This should be written on it. permanent color, it's just light blue. So I'll use a light blue, and then I'll do a couple of circles where the eyes would be, sorry, the light reflection. And then around that, I use a deeper navy color. If you're doing it purely with watercolor, you might go the phthalo blue, and then black around that. Actually, it's more than 3 colors, because then usually I use a quinacridone gold just around beyond the pupil itself. So those are the colors that I use, not many. Yeah, and like I said, I think it's really great if you tackle the eye first, just in case you make a little slip up. It's not so much to start the fish again, whereas it's one of the most detailed parts of the fish, the eye, I think, and also it's one that draws the eye to it, your own eye to it. So you really want it to be one of the best parts of the fish.
And I even find personality, like puffers have, they can be a bit cheeky, and other fish are kind of like lining you up. And you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, look, yeah, you're absolutely right. The eye, it can create character in the fish too. I think the eye in most animal subjects is one of the most important parts, really. Like you said, yeah, it could be eyeing you up, it could be angry, it could be a very soft, gentle, cheeky eye. Yeah, so it's interesting you asked that question. But yeah, literally just a few colors, not many at all.
Yeah, and I don't use the iridescence in the eye because I don't find fish have kind of that. The eye tends to be watery and 3-dimensional. It's drawing you in, as opposed to the fish scales are kind of reflective and Sorry, yeah. I've lost my ability to do English. I'm just loving your artwork. So I'm going to mute now, and you continue.
You're absolutely right. When it comes to the eye, I don't actually particularly use the watercolors much. Sometimes a little bit of that blue pearl. And look, actually, it's reminded me of another watercolor that I quite often like to use on the face. This is a great one, Duochrome Lapis Sunlight. It's similar to the Arctic Fire. However, it's got a little bit more body, a little bit more. There are darker colors in it, so it doesn't always feature in my fish, but quite often I will use it on the face of the fish. When it comes to the eyes, I'll maybe use a little bit of the blue pearl watercolor, but the rest of it, I really turn to Copic for the black. That is very strong, multi-liner, and the pencils that I use. And then just that little slither of quinacridone gold around the outside, I find that works a treat. I love quinacridone gold, and that's why I thought I'd bring up these bees. Look, I've got duochrome. Oh no, that's saguaro green. I was hoping I would find. Here it is. Serpentine genuine. What a paint. So I thought I'd bring the bees up. This was done for an exhibition, and the original sold. But I'm going to soon be releasing it as excuse me, an art print. Just bring the paper of it. Oh, another little tip. Bear with me just a second. I don't have one. I'll be back. I'm just grabbing a swatch. This is really important when you're doing prints and originals. If you want your water, and please excuse it's muddy, I didn't get a second jar. It's really important if you actually want your water to be near your painting to pop down a little swatch, because one time I was working on a large snapper piece and I put it straight on the paper and it created such a terrible ring. There must have been some water at the base of the jar. I had just about completed the fish and had to start it all over again. And it was a huge amount of work. So, we learn from our mistakes, but there's just something I always do is if I want my water nearby, I use a little swatch. So I'm going to just hand embellish. Oh, yes, that's taken beautifully. Now, this is interesting for me because, like I said, the embellishment of the barramundi didn't go as planned to normal. And I think that's because my printer's got a new printer. So I'll be looking into that. But this is done with his previous printer. This is an A2. And you'll notice that it's actually taking the paint really quite beautifully. I might just move that because it's creating a shadow. So I'm just using a bit of the serpentine here. Again, what an amazing watercolor that's made from a very pure mineral, which I believe, John, comes from Tasmania.
Actually, the luminescents are all synthetic, and that's because they were made for the car industry, and the perfection on them is just unbelievable. What they're super complex pigments.
So does that include the serpentine?
No, serpentine's a Primatech, and that does come from Tasmania.
Yeah, that's the one I was referring to.
Yeah,
that's the one that I've got here, serpentine genuine. So
absolutely.
yeah, and it's so here we go.
Jim, are you using the Arctic fire on the wings of the insects?
John, I will. This is a new one for me to be hand embellishing. I'm just going to pop a bit of blue pearl. So here we are. We have duochrome blue pearl. So this is a native Australian bee, I should mention first, tell you about the bee. It's a stingless bee. It is one of the most stunning little bees in the whole world, in my opinion. They literally have vibrant, shiny blue and black bands on them, and the blue pearl is absolutely perfect for it. So let's get a little bit of blue pearl in there. You know, I wish we had all the time in the world to actually create one of these originals rather than hand embellishing. But, you know, I just thought it would be interesting to show, you know, what you can do if you're producing art prints. You'll see that blue pearl is being taken there. Beautiful. And this is, blue pearl was the first Daniel Smith watercolor that I discovered, as it turned out. And I just love it.
Those are beautiful.
So yeah, this is a really interesting little bee. Believe it or not, the females live alone in little burrows they make, where you know the I don't know how do they give birth to their young? How does that work? Oh, it's eggs, isn't it? They live in a little burrow, whereas the males roost in a group at night on little branches that are hanging down. So yeah, the males all gang up together, and the female, she kind of does her own thing away from them. So okay, I got a bit of blue pearl in there. Now I'm going to go for some quinacridone gold. I love quinacridone gold. Can you see how look at it, how the iridescence, it just makes the colors pop. It brings a piece to life, whether it's an art print you're working on, or, you know, whether it's actually your original. It just gives it that, it makes it pop. I'm in love with them. Here we go. Get a bit on this leg. So they're furry little guys. So really, you know, with my prints, I only spend about 5 minutes on each one. So it's great to be able to, you know, actually give them all that personal touch. And, you know, John, you're absolutely right. We'll go for some Arctic fire. Now, naturally, I would normally have fresh water this time. I usually go and change my water regularly, but, you know, for the purpose of the demonstration. Now then, let's see what the Arctic fire does to these wings. I think it's going to really bring them alive. And it's very interesting. Yeah, this has been interesting for me that my prints are from a different printer. You know, the Barramundi before, it didn't actually work as it usually does for me. But that's how these things go. So yeah, look, you can really see where I'm standing with the light shining against it. I'm seeing that turquoise color working beautifully. I'm not sure whether you're picking it up in the camera, but I will move the camera afterwards so that we can see the different angles on it. And yeah, John, you're spot on. The Arctic fire is perfect for bees' wings. I'm loving this. Now, just move my water aside. I'm just going to do a little cheeky pencil line in there for a little bit of darkness. But obviously, you know, it could be done with a watercolor. I do not have a black at the moment. There are always watercolors that I'm keen to get hold of. You know, there was one amazing one. I've forgotten the name. Moonlight.
Moonglow.
Is that right, John?
Moonglow?
Moonglow. That's it. Yeah, that is on my wish list. There we go. So let's get this camera and have a look at the angles. Look at the wings. Can you see that?
Yeah, those are neat.
Super.
That is, isn't it just? Oh, looks like I've popped a bit of water on there. I'm working quickly, so yeah, look, and it really catches the light. There we go.
Mm.
And the blue pearl, look at how that's just,
Wow.
yeah, I'm glad we did the bees. And, you know, the serpentine as well really gave it some depth. That's actually a little sheoak stem. And, you know, they can, the males, these are males because that's how they group. It's called roosting. They roost together, and that vegetation is sheoak, or casuarina as it's also known. There we go. How's that?
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It just works, doesn't it?
Just
Yeah.
yummy. Mm.
You got to get Arctic Fire. It is on
You
fire.
sold it. I hope you've got a lot in stock, John.
Now, I wish I could show you the turquoise effect, but I think it's because I'm just working under this artificial light. But believe me, when you work with Arctic Fire, you will notice that in one direction it picks up those pinks, the lilac, but you know, when you shift to the other direction, and it's not actually showing it with our camera, it would normally, in natural light, it gives off a turquoise. So there we go. There we go, that's ready to go. Okay, that's me done the demonstration. So we just managed to do 3 pieces there. Yeah, hopefully I can do some more in the future. I really enjoyed doing that. So yeah, I'll spin my camera back now, John.
So,
Hello?
Ethel, can you flip it?
No,
Yeah.
Jen, it's on his camera.
Okay.
Practice
Okay.
earlier.
Yeah, we're there. Oops. Back in the room.
Well, those were awesome. The fish are phenomenal. The bees are just, they're just warm. They're just neat. Furry bees, furry blue bees.
And that's what they are, yeah, in nature. They are lovely, beautiful, furry little blue bees with an incredible electric blue. And, you know, John, that's the first time I've done that with this. That Arctic Fire on the wings just really gave them life. You know, it really made it pop. And yeah, look, it would be lovely to do a demonstration of an original, but obviously it takes hours. So I often do hyperlapse on my Instagram. Most of my fish, just about every fish I do are done as hyperlapse. So if anybody does want to see, have a flick through the reels on Instagram, and you'll see the whole process. Quite often in the reels, I show the drafting on tracing paper. Let me show you something actually. So what I was talking about using the baking paper, when I'm working on a large piece, this is what I end up doing. This was a Mako shot that I produced. And as you can see, just to create a large piece of tracing paper, I end up actually using masking tape and sandwiching 2 pieces, connecting them together for that. So yeah, a lot of my reels, they are done in hyperlapse and demonstrate the drafting process, followed through the pencil work and then the watercolor afterwards. So yeah, plenty of fun to have looking through those.
Jim, what's the largest piece that you've done?
Oh, let me see, John. I think, you know, currently it's the series I'm working on for Tackle World Port Lincoln. They're 1.7 meter long pieces of paper. So I should actually mention what paper I use. I do love a lot of the cotton rags, but obviously I can't get hold of them in this large format. Yeah, I love Saunders Waterford, the hot press, and I love Arches as well. but for these large fish works, I use Canson CA grain because that comes in a 1.5 meter by 10 meter roll. So, you know, I could go up to 10 meters. We could do a whale shark. Actually, I did have somebody request a 2.8 meter marlin, but he never got back in touch with me. And to be honest, I didn't really want to tackle it. It would require me to get a new desk in to do it. But yeah, I'm getting some commissions that are coming in for around the 1.8 meter for the actual fish. So they'll need to be done on a 2 meter 20 piece of paper. So some of these kingfish that, you know, fishermen send me, they're really very large. Yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome.
And the mulloway, my next piece that I'm doing for Tackle World Port Lincoln, John, is a mulloway, also called a jewfish, and it's a scaled fish. So that's just about to come up. I'll be doing that one on my stories and reels in the next couple of weeks. They take a real long time. You know, I had a guy, John Oatley, his fish was incredible. It was a 1 meter 54 from memory. So that's the biggest fish that I've done yet. So yeah, well done, John, for catching that one.
Wow. So everybody, you've watched Jim do the luminescent, and in particular the duochrome. Now would be a perfect time for any of you that haven't used the duochromes to ask questions of Jim. His work is just masterful.
Oh, thank you, John.
Oh, it's beautiful. So until somebody asks, go ahead. Until somebody asks you a question, I see that you're using a lot of the duochromes. Have you tried the iridescent or the interference?
Do you know, I don't have any interference yet. I'm just building up. I've got a lovely box full of all of my Daniel Smith watercolors that I'm collecting. My next one that I'm going to be looking for will be, I'd like an iridescent lilac, a very light sort of purple color to use particularly on the cheeks and down the flank of the fish. But obviously, yeah, just that little bit extra beyond the Arctic Fire. The Arctic Fire does create a pink lilac tinge. But yeah, I'm going to be looking for a very light magenta or lilac color. So do you have an iridescent in that series, John?
Yeah, we do. I'll send you some samples.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That's music to my ears.
So Chris,
send us
Yeah,
all some samples, John.
so
Question.
Chris has a
Hi.
question. Do you use reference photos since you can't keep the fish for long?
Great question. Yes, the artwork, the commissions for fishermen really appeal particularly to catch and release fishermen. So most catch and release fishermen do actually take really good photos. Occasionally I'll get a tricky piece come through where the photos are a bit blurry, and you know, but most of my pieces I search through the internet for as many photographs as I can. There's a lot of out there, and I use those in conjunction with the fishermen's actual photographs of their own fish. Most of the fish that I've created, apart from a few, I've caught myself, so they're ingrained in my mind. But you know, I get some really interesting fish come up too. I've got a customer, a client in the United States who recently traveled to the Amazon fishing, quite a few over there, love to get down to the Amazon. And he sent me a wonderful photograph of a gigantic arapaima. And the arapaima that he caught from this area wasn't the typical silver colors they are. It was a more bronze gold color. So I'm going to have fun in a month or two creating that as a commission piece for that particular guy. But yeah, look, I do use a lot of photographs that I download. But what I always offer the fishermen is an actual 2-scale size fish if they want to have one. You know, a lot of people just want to have an A2 or an A1, but I do find the majority of the fishermen, they love to be able to have it done to size and scale. So I use an interesting process for some of the features there from their photographs where I can. What I do is I get the photograph and I scale it up onto my iPad so that it is, you know, I'll take measurements of the photograph, and then once I've got the dimensions from them, I will get the iPad set so that it's perfectly to scale. And I do for really just for the features of maybe some split fins Often an individual fish will have a characteristic of certain splits in the fins and features of the face. I actually put the baking paper over the top of the iPad and use a 6B pencil and trace some of those features. So that, you know, they're as the fish was. There's an interesting process if you Google this, Gyotaku, which is quite popular. It's a old Japanese art, and a lot of people around the globe are doing it. There's some great guys in Hawaii doing Gyotaku, whereby the fish, now unfortunately with this, it's not catch and release for this though, whereas mine, people just need a few photographs. So mine is perfect for that catch and release fisherman. But Gyotaku, the dead fish, is placed on ink and then rolled over a canvas or paper, and the imprint, you know, is then set on that medium. And some artists around the world are now embellishing that once it's dried, that with colored inks. It's just another way that fish are getting done. But yeah, there's not many people that I know of that are doing the 2-scale fish. In fact, I do not know many other people that are doing them to scale. And you know, and there are no boundaries with it. It's great, and you know, I constantly get different fish species coming in. It's never dull. I did early on when I started offering that service of the individual fisherman's catch. I thought, am I going to be just doing barramundi? I love barramundi, don't get me wrong, but will I only be doing barramundi constantly and then lose my passion for it? But no, I'm finding I'm constantly getting new fish. And, you know, I was recently introduced by Corvinator, Giolano of Peru, to a fish called a corvina. So occasionally I'll get a fish I haven't actually caught. And I have never seen a corvina. I haven't visited Peru yet in person. So that was tricky. There's always some challenges that I find. And it is particularly challenging if it is a fish I have never seen or caught. I have to, you know, get as many references together as possible to get that fish right for the fisherman. So yeah, it's exciting. And, you know, I love it when I get some other pieces come through. Yeah, I've got a customer requesting a crustacean, a crayfish soon. I'll love to do that. And I really enjoy doing the prawn and the oyster. That's I've done a few oysters now, and they're fun. And again, the Arctic fire works a treat on that pearlescent shell. Yeah.
Very cool. Have you used have you done your fish on black paper? Because black paper would just boom, just pop.
I haven't yet, John. That is a fantastic idea. So yeah, I do love that. I haven't done it yet, no.
Awesome. On the Facebook side, they just loved your demonstration. Have you tried the iridescent electric blue?
Can you repeat which blue it was?
Have you tried the iridescent electric blue?
Not the electric blue. I must look at that one. It's iridescent duochrome blue pearl is the one I have. Iridescent blue sounds wonderful. Yeah, and particularly for the bees. Yeah, I had a lot of fun just doing that just now with the bees. There's some wonderful colors in there.
I liked your discussions about the duochromes. For those of you watching, the duochromes are the luminescent that actually shift to 2 different colors, like Jim is saying, whereas the iridescent will show over white, and the interference is actually more transparent over white. So there's a real mix among those colors, and the duochrome are actually quite beautiful. I like when you're saying that you're walking past a piece of artwork, you can see the shift. Saw a little bit when you were moving the paper. I saw the shift. It was very neat to see that.
And it's actually, yeah, John, I think it must be, I'm using an LED strip light. In the daylight, the turquoise from the Arctic fire is my favorite. Between the pinks and the turquoise shift, the turquoise part is actually my favorite part. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to demonstrate that, you know, in the slide. But all I can say is, everybody out there, go get some Arctic fire. It's on fire.
Awesome. So does anybody have any last questions for Jim today? It's 3:50 in the morning in Australia?
4 a.m. So I've got just an hour or 20. I think I'll stay awake. I'll be doing a morning meditation with Tom Carroll. I did you know, my two favorite most rewarding, I suppose, pieces that I've done so far have been the Kuwait neon signs that I created. Huge neon signs in Kuwait on the biggest fish and tackle store there for modern waves. That's just so rewarding. I've got to visit those guys and see them in person. They're gigantic. And I did a beautiful trade with Tom Carroll. Tom was the world champion surfer in the early 1990s. And Tom taught me how to do Vedic meditation. In exchange, I designed him a mahi-mahi that's on his foil surfboards. So that was beautiful. So yeah, I'll be staying up and doing a meditation with Tom at 5:20 in the morning. He does it on Instagram. You know, I was going to mention somebody because we didn't talk about, I know it was in my questions, inspiration, and on my bio, the questions, my inspiration does come from the fish. It comes from what I see. It comes from the ocean. But there is a lady, Cindy Lane Art. Cindy Lane, she, I've found her work really inspirational when it comes to watercolor. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, if nobody's following Cindy, yeah, get on there and check out what she does, because it's absolutely beautiful. And her work is all ocean-based as well. So yeah,
she's fantastic.
Sorry,
I like the way that she can move the pigment around her paper. It's just it's mind blowing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, it's exciting how we all work in our different ways, and I find that my art is constantly evolving. You know, it's not traditional watercolor. It's a mixture of pencil. It's more mixed media. And you know, from time to time, actually the blue banded bees, interestingly enough, which was done for the Natural Resources Management book, that was one of my few only watercolor pieces. That the original, I didn't use any pencil on that, but I've just developed a technique for creating the fish that's working nicely for me, using that combination, which I think is, you know, kind of unique in itself. Awesome. Well, Jim, thank you so much. Your energy comes through so strong. Thank you so much. Love seeing your artwork. It's fantastic. And thank you everybody
John,
for joining today, Friday. It's been marvelous. Please visit Jim's site to see artwork and follow him. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
Bye,
John.
everybody.
I really hope to see you again. Thank you.
Okay.